So today, we will be talking about your first Canadian work experience as part of Launch Your Career in Canada. Tomorrow, we will be talking about the art of building connections at 12 p.m. On Thursday, we will have an in-person event connecting you with previous international alumni and also recruiters. The event is currently at capacity. We have a wait list for it. If you have not so far heard of the event, you're interested in participating, you're welcome to go on Careers Online, sign up, and we will let you know if you got off the wait list. If you have signed up and you no more can make it, I will appreciate it if you actually go on Careers Online and cancel your participation so another person can have an opportunity to attend. And I'm going to put a link in the chat. In the beginning, I mentioned that I will send you the slides, but I won't have your contact information unless you go through the link and let us know that you're here. So I'm going to give you a minute to just either scan the QR code or use the link in the chat to show your attendance. So I would be able to actually send you the slides after the presentation, and then we'll get into the content. Okay, on today's rare sunny weather here in Vancouver, we're going to talk about your first Canadian work experience. But before that, I would like to acknowledge that UBC Career Center is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Musqueam people. And I invite all of you to think about what it means to be an uninvited guest on traditional land. So before telling you about how to find your first Canadian work experience, I was wondering and curious, how do you feel about your finding your first Canadian work experience? And you can use the annotate function to just like draw a line or a check mark on the slide, or put it in the chat how you feel about finding your first Canadian work experience. And if you haven't used annotate before, if you look at the bar that says share chat, there is a pen that says annotate. If you activate that, you will be able to actually draw on the slide. And if you're not somewhere that you can do that, you can always put it in the chat. Yeah, like hard, adventurous, probably, a checklist of things that you need to do. Yeah, pushing a stone off a cliff. So difficult, requires a lot of energy. I see some confusing, maybe not sure how to pass the process or how to go through the process. Other thoughts, feelings, hard, haven't found a job in Vancouver. Yeah, that's fair. Terrified, yes, scary. Excited and anxious at the same time, yeah. Okay, other thoughts? So I hope by this slide, you can see that most people chose things aligned. It's hard, it's anxiety inducing, it's confusing, and they're like rare marks on positive ones, like the person who is smiling or has a checklist. So it's common to feel anxious, worried, and terrified about the process. And there's a comment in the chat, you need experience for this job, which will grant you the experience you need for this job. Yes, like feeling like it's a loop going around all the time. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can actually get your first experience without having experience. Okay, I'm just going to remove the drawings from this one. And what concerns do you have about finding your first Canadian work experience? You can put it in the chat or start typing on the slide so other people can also see it too. Okay, feeling like you're not really hearing back from the companies that you're applying to and just wondering, okay, what is going on? Other concerns. A lot of competition, okay? How to navigate a lot of people applying for one job. That the job market is not healthy right now. So maybe feeling like the market is not at a good place right now, a lot of layoffs happening, hitting a roadblock, applying, not hearing back, unsure of what to do next, where to find it, how to get your first foot in the door. All positions seems to need direct connection to get in. If there is advantage of not being local, so feeling like, oh, actually, am I at disadvantage if I'm an international student? How to build a network and also connections. Yeah. Other thoughts before we move on? Yeah, all of those concerns are valid. I know I had all of those concerns when I was an international student and I was looking for my first job post-graduation out of my master's and feeling like I don't have a network or connections. I don't know where to start from. So hopefully today we're gonna go through some of those pieces and how to get work experience to help you get permanent residency, right? Some of the constraints that you might have as an international student, making sure that you can stay in Canada or go through the immigration process you need to go through based on the job that you have. Okay, so let's begin. And hopefully we can go through all of those questions in the time that we have. At the end of the session, I'm going to pause the recording and you're welcome to stay back if you have any questions or conversations that you're not comfortable having while we're recording. I'm happy to leave that for the end of the conversation. But the first thing that you want to do as part of your process of searching for a job is getting a little bit of clarity about what you need out of this process. So what do I mean by that? So some of the questions you can ask yourself to clarify your job search goals are, why do I even need this job? So that answer can look like something like, I need PR and I want to stay in Canada, so I need a job that is aligned with a specific NOC code. It can be, I have a family and I need to provide for them, so I need a job. That motivation can slightly look differently for different people, but clarifying for yourself, what is the motivation for the job search right now for you? That can be different when you are a student versus when you're nearly graduating. And when do you really need this job? Do I really need a job in 2 weeks because I need to pay the bills, or am I graduating in 6 months and hopefully I have a job before I graduate? And if you're students, how many hours a week do you actually can you actually work, or do you actually want to work with all the workload and course load that you have? And how much money do you need to make? A job is for a lot of us a tool to sustain ourselves first. And what is that number that you absolutely need to have to be able to either sustain yourself or live a life that you want? And what is the location? Where do you want to work? I read in the comments a bit about, oh, Vancouver is not a good market. So are we sad in our job search to stay in Vancouver? Are we open to applying to elsewhere? So what do we think about location? And do we have any preferences for the environment of work? So do I want to work remotely, hybrid, in the office, or what type of working culture do I want to be part of? Especially if you have previous work experience, you might have had experiences in workplaces where things were not pleasant. So for this job search, you might have actually specific requirements in terms of what you want the environment to be like. If you're a student and you've never had a formal job, through some of your volunteer work, working in courses on some of the projects, you might have noticed in yourself that, oh, I just want to work by myself more, or I actually really need to be part of a team to be able to do a good job. And also a little bit of reflection on what do you think you're good at and what are some of the skills that you have. And that will kind of define the type of work that you can do. Something to kind of think about is the skills are not only the things that you have learned out of a job, it's also the skills that you have gained as part of the courses. So if you're applying for a data analyst job, what are some of the skills you're bringing in terms of data from some of the courses that you have taken? And if you are looking for kind of a higher level type of job search, what impact do you want to make? Do you want to work with a specific population? Are you setting working in a specific industry? Are there specific problems you want to solve as part of your role? And also, what are some of the things that you want to learn? Something that, especially when we're early in our career, we don't realize is our first jobs are also potential for us to learn. As someone mentioned in the chat, there is this like loop of, well, I need experience to be able to apply for a job that I want. And learning in our first jobs are really important and will be stepping stones for the next things that we want to achieve. So maybe my long-term goal is to become a data analyst, but I don't find roles right now in that field because my degree is not relevant. What is the job that maybe a big part of it is relevant to my degree, but it also enables me to work for part of it with data, so I can get some experience for the next role that I'm looking for. So these are some of the questions you want to ask yourself before starting the job search process. And I know there are so many of them. So what do you prioritize? One thing I would recommend you doing before going looking at job postings and applying and feeling frustrated is what are some of your non-negotiables and negotiables in the job search stage that you're in. That can look like something for non-negotiables as I have a specific disability. I need accommodation to be able to do my job. And I am not really willing to work in a role or work for a company that doesn't give me that type of accommodation. I am a graduate student. I already have a family. I cannot make below 80K to sustain my family. And maybe I also need a job to be in a specific knock category. And those are my non-negotiables. So those are the things that I absolutely need for a job. And maybe my negotiables could be, well, I would prefer to work hybrid, but I'm okay accepting a job that is fully in the office. Or it's my first job, Vancouver is a tough market, I am willing to relocate to another province, to another city at this stage of my career. Or I would prefer to work for a large company, but if a small company gives me all my non-negotiables, I'm okay working for them. And something to consider also is that this list will look differently at different stages of the job search. So if at one stage, for instance, now you're going through the process to get your permanent residence and you absolutely need a job that is in a specific knock category, you go look for a job that is in that category. And then you have your PR, you look for jobs that might be more aligned with your interests. So actually a non-negotiable that at that stage can look like, I won't work from the office. I absolutely need the role to be hybrid. And then, or I absolutely want to live somewhere that is sunny. So that is my non-negotiable. So that non-negotiables and negotiables change based on the stage of the career that you're in. But it's helpful to now sit down and write down what are some of your non-negotiables and some of the negotiables. After you've done that, then what are some of the tools you can actually use to plan for a career that is aligned with some of those reflections? You have answered some of those questions around what is your motivation? What is your timeline? What do you want to learn? What is the environment? What are your non-negotiables and negotiables? Then how do we get there? How do we get to a job that is aligned with what we have reflected on? The first thing you need to do is now then go out there and do a little bit of the research about the labor market and employers. And some of the ways you can actually do that research, you can look at some of the job postings on some of those job search engines, such as LinkedIn, or some of the industry association pages. I think this is something that most of you might be familiar with. I would elaborate a little bit on industry association pages. Sometimes industry associations have a specific section that says jobs, that they post specific jobs for that specific industry. They also do networking events. So it is always a good idea to check the industry association in the region that you're in. So for instance, if you're interested in creative industry, you can always say Creative Industry Association BC. Or if you're interested in tech, you can type something like Tech Companies Association in BC. And then you will see the list of associations in the region. And if you are thinking about relocating to another province, you can always do that for other provinces. Pay attention to the news that are related to your industry. You will hear about some emerging companies that might be hiring. Some of those trends that people mentioned in the chat, like someone mentioned the market is not healthy, but then you will get a little bit of more information about what is happening in the industry that you're actually interested in, instead of taking all the anxiety just about the market by seeing this 1, 2, 3 random LinkedIn posts that you see about the market. You can always actually Google the list of best employers in the region that you work with, that you're in. It will give you some ideas around even like first what companies exist in the region that you're interested in. And if you have any non-negotiables that are important to you, you can kind of filter for that. So if you have a certain disability and it's important for you that the employer is actually accommodating, you can always say best employers in BC for diversity and inclusion, and see what type of companies show up. You can also use WorkBC as a research tool to get labor market information. And in a second, I'm going to show you a snapshot of the website. So WorkBC is an organization that supports British Columbians in finding roles and understanding the labor market here in the region. They do have a lot of good training material on their website. They also publish reports on trends of specific industries in BC. And the government of Canada also has a job bank that has reports on different industries in different regions, as well as the job profile for knock codes. And I will actually go through that website in a second, because I think it's one of the ones that a lot of people don't know about, and you can get a lot of good information from it. So this is the WorkBC website, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. And I'm going to send you the slides, so you will actually have access to all of those links. But this is basically the interface of the website. You can see there's a research and labor market information page that has information about the BC's economy, the outlooks of different industries in the region. And they also have a lot of job search tools on the website that are free and you can kind of take a look at. And then this is also the job bank one that I was mentioning. It's by Government of Canada. The good thing about it is if you're interested in other regions or in other provinces, you can actually get information about the labor market from this website for other regions as well. So it's not limited to BC, and I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. And in a second, you're actually gonna look at some of those trends and see what type of information you can actually get from those websites. So another part of the job bank website is this explore the market trend analysis. I'm gonna click on the link and we're gonna go to the website to look at how we can actually use it. So here you can actually search either by an occupation, by wages, or by outlooks. And give me an occupation or a job title in the chat that you're interested in, and I can search it up. Anyone has a job title that they're interested to see? Communications coordinator. And I will just tell you that this is basically based on NOC codes. So it might not have the specific one that you're interested in. So we might need to kind of look at some of the things that exist under the NOC code to be able to kind of get it. I think let's look at, for instance, communications advisor. And see, maybe for location, we will go with Vancouver. Okay. And then in the kind of description, what you can see is basically the NOC code for it. And also the description, like the NOC description for it. Job duties, job titles. It might be useful for you to see that NOC code if you need a specific subsection for your PR application. It also tells you a little bit about the prospects of it in the region. So it says basically some of the current and future job prospects. So you will get a sense of, okay, what okay, is my screen frozen? Okay, so can you see my screen? Okay, so let's try this and hopefully it will resolve it. Okay. Can everyone see it now? Okay, so can you see it now? Okay, amazing. So let's go back then to the summary so we can see what happened after the search. So when I hit search, the communication advisor, it gave me a description based on the NOC code. It gave me some information about the prospects, some requirements. Does it need a university degree? What levels? Tells us about the wages, prospects, the jobs that are advertised right now and are available, and what are some of the skills that this job requires. And I think depending on what you're interested in, you can look at different ones. And what I also really like about it is if you're thinking about going to another province and maybe you've heard of, oh, there are more jobs as a communication person in this other province, you can look at this kind of summary and see, is that really true? Or you can look at the prospects and see, oh, is what people are saying about, oh, there are just more job opportunities for communications in this other province. Is that really true? Or for this other city? And kind of get a little bit of an overall snapshot of what is happening. And it will also give you the NOC code. If you're interested on, like, as I mentioned, if there's a specific subcategory that you need to have for your PR application. Okay, back to the slides. Okay. So we did some of these trend. Let's say we have done these trend analysis. We looked at some of the prospects of a job in a specific region. We looked at some of those reports. The next step is becoming a little bit more detailed. So we can actually conduct some informational interviews. One of the most important things that you would do for yourself in your career development is working on building your networking connections. It helps you meet new people, it helps you learn new things, and also increases your connection with the market. You can actually go more into detail about what a company culture is like. If you're interested in a specific role, talking to people to see how other people have actually gotten there. What are some of the experiences they have gotten to get there? If you're struggling to land a job in a specific industry, asking a little bit about what would someone as a communication advisor is in a competitive advantage when they go through the job search process. We call these conversations informational interviews or coffee chats. And something that is important to keep in mind culturally in Canada is that at least the first conversation need to solely be focused on information. So never ask for a referral in a first conversation or ask someone for a job in the first conversation. The first conversation is about getting to know a new person. When we talk to people who are working professionals and connect with people, they always say that they prefer it when students are actually ready for those meetings. So be the person who lead the conversation. Have some questions ready for the person. So don't show up unready. Someone else is taking time out of their day to talk to you. So make sure that you're ready for those conversations. Tomorrow, we're going to talk more in detail about the art of building some of those connections. But as a beginning, know that informational interviews are really important to getting a bit of more detailed information about what is actually happening in the market. So that comment of the market is not healthy right now. Yeah, on average, if you look at a specific industry and you see that there are more layoffs than hirings, it might create this kind of feeling that, oh, the market is not healthy, there are no jobs. But maybe you will talk to someone who is working in a specific company and they will tell you, we're currently hiring, or these are the roles that currently have opening. So it also helps you really put into context some of the higher level information that you're hearing in the news or through different avenues. So basically what you want to do is get a generic feel, get a 30K feet view of what are some of the industry trends, what companies are hiring, what is the typical salary range for the industry that you're in. And then you want to go microscopic. So look at some of the online reviews of companies that you like, connect with people on LinkedIn to hear a bit more about the company culture, what the role that they have actually entails. And then go back to your list of negotiables and non-negotiables and see, okay, do I actually really want to still apply to this company? Is it aligned with what I'm looking for? And if I want to still apply for this, based on my conversations, what are some of the things that I need to send in a good application? And as you're applying for different roles, it's also really important to tell your own story. So never assume that a recruiter or a hiring manager is going to really know why you're applying for the job that you're applying to, or how your experiences are connecting to the roles that you're applying for. It's your responsibility as a job seeker to actually make those connections. So sometimes we might look at one of our experiences and feel like, it's so obvious that this experience is really relevant to this other role that I'm applying for. I'm applying for a communication coordinator role. I have done communication as part of a club in university, or I have done communication before. But you always need to make it clear what parts of the role that you've done is actually relevant to this next role that you're applying to. How to do this? Always make sure that your documents showcases the most relevant aspect of your previous experiences. And you can easily do this with some of the bullet points that you have on your documents. You always want to showcase the aspect of the job that is relevant. So if you have done 20 different things in that job, highlight 5 that you can see is relevant to the next role that you're applying to. And you always want to tell a clear story of how your previous experiences or even education help you succeed in the role that you're applying for now. And use your cover letter space to tell that clear story. make clear how some of the skills you have learned as part of these other roles, some of the experiences that you have gained, is going to help you in the next role that you will be taking on. And note that as you're applying for a role, even if you don't have previous experience, you have accomplished things in the past. You have taken a course, completed a project. Be proud of that and focus on what you're looking for next and in the future. What do I mean by that? As you're applying for our first jobs in a new country or a first job period out of school, I sometimes feel like I need to just sell myself to the employer. I need to make clear how my skills is relevant to this job, and then add one sentence that says, I'm really excited to join your team and contribute in X and Y and Z ways to your company. But one of the biggest pieces that I see usually misses from application documents and also in the interview is, why this job? Why have you applied for this? Why is this the next step for you? What do you want to learn from this opportunity? And that is important because, especially in a market that is tough and there's a lot of competition, because skills might be really close to each other. Also, teaching a skill is easy, but what is really hard is teaching motivation. So if I see that you have a reason to be in the role that you're applying for, it kind of removes the concern of, okay, how am I going to keep this person motivated? And that also applies, especially if you're applying for roles that might look like is below some of the roles that you have had before. So if you are an international student, you were a professional in your own country, and you're applying to some of the roles that might feel more entry level than some of the roles that you've held before, it's important to make clear why you're taking on those roles clearly. And you can also kind of come to the in-person event to hear a little bit more about from recruiters in terms of how they see those different pieces of relevance of experience, interest, kind of come through in documents and in their decision-making process. Also, if you have limited or no work experience, which was one of the first comments that came through in the chat, you might need to consider maybe starting with a more entry-level role or even a volunteer role to get some experience. And sometimes if also money is a problem, maybe combining multiple roles or type of experiences. For instance, having a part-time volunteer role that is in communication, so it will create the skills that you need to apply for a paid communication role. But also have a survival job on the side that helps you pay the bills. And if your work experience is also limited, networking will become even more important in your job search process, because on paper, you might not look like the best candidate, but if through those conversations, you can establish that you're willing to learn, you're interested in the role, how some of your other skills actually can contribute to the role, you might have a chance of at least interviewing for a role and go kind of beyond that initial interview, initial kind of application stage. And another thing that I will also mention, always on your documents, showcase part of your education that is relevant. So you might not have a specific experience that is relevant to the role, but you might have done a research project as part of school that is actually relevant to the role. And education is still experience. So don't undermine some of the things that you have done in school. Always include them on your application documents. There's a question in the chat. Is being a graduate student counts towards work experience? I would not know this from immigration perspective, but from the employer perspective, I will invite you to always think about whatever experience or education in this way. Employers care about skills, not necessarily where they've come from. So if you have been a research assistant as part of your master's or PhD program, the skills that you bring will be relevant to a research job in industry. So employers will care about them. employers care about skills you bring, not necessarily where they come from. So yes, it is a type of experience. And I will showcase that is in part of my documents, for instance, on my resume as either research experience or relevant experience or relevant projects. If it's not, for instance, a position, but that was a project that you worked on, that is relevant. And if anything is unclear, let me know. I'm happy to clarify. Hey. And I also invite you to ask questions in job interviews. Interviews are supposed to be two-way streets. They're not just about the employer learning about you. It's also about you learning if the employer and the role align with your needs. Because I know that sometimes when you're looking for a job, we just say to ourselves, I just need a job. But you hopefully don't want to in a job and end up in a position where you're working in a culture that is impacting your mental health, or working for a role that you're not even enjoying a second of it. And that interview process actually helps you get a little bit of information about the employer and see if there are any red flags, any things that you absolutely have in your list of non-negotiables and the employer is showcasing. So you, even if you get an offer, you might not want it. And we always get a question of, so what questions should I ask? So there are no specific questions you should ask, but you should prepare to ask some questions that show that you have interest in the role and you have given this a bit of thought. So some of the things you can think about as you think about questions to ask is, what are you looking for in the next role or manager or employer? Especially if you have previous experience, maybe you have had an encounter with a previous supervisor as a graduate student that you're like, oh, micromanagement is something that I absolutely don't want my next manager to do. So you might ask a question around, what is the supervision style like in your team? And what are you looking to avoid in your next role or manager? Based on the job posting and other knowledge that you have, what are you genuinely curious about? I know job postings are sometimes vague. They're too long to a point that you don't really think you know what is actually happening in that job. So you can always ask basically more detailed question if you feel like part of the job posting is not clear. And always be prepared to take notes. So have a notebook to take notes just beside you as you're doing interviewing, because usually in the beginning of the interview, they give some summary of what the job is about. And when you're in that stressed mode of, oh, what is happening? What question am I gonna answer? You might not hear or like clearly remember some of the things that they've mentioned. So putting it down helps you to later in the question section of it, just circle back to it and say, you mentioned in the beginning of the interview X, I'm wondering why. And I think that also showcases attention to detail, that you're present in the interview, so it will make a good impression overall. And as an international student, I would also like you to know what are your rights. So under the Employment Standards Act of BC, any question about age, race, ancestry, religion, sex, marital status, physical and mental disability, place of origin, political beliefs, family status, and sexual orientation are illegal unless it's directly related to the position. And what does related to the position really mean? It means employers are not allowed to ask about your age, but if you're applying to become a bartender, they can ask if you're at the legal age to do that. So they can ask the exact age, but they can say if you are above the legal age to serve alcohol. They're not allowed to ask about your ethnicity, but they can ask if you are legally allowed to work in Canada. That's the extent of what they can ask. The employer cannot ask about your physical ability, but if the job requires you to lift like 30K or something, they can ask if you're able to do that. And pre-hiring criminal background check is permissible in Canada, but the employer needs to establish that there is an occupational requirement for doing so. So, for instance, employer can ask for a criminal background check if you will be working with youth. Never put your age on your resume. It's not common in the Canadian system to have your age, your marital status, your photo on your documents. I know in some countries it's common to have that information. Don't include it. And also including it kind of signals that you don't have an understanding of how the Canadian market works. And I've also included this section because I know that sometimes you don't mind sharing that information, but I want you to know the point that you give that information to the employer, you don't know whether or not it has impacted their decision-making process. So whether or not you're married or planning to have kids might be a question that culturally would be okay for someone to ask in your home country. But if you provide that information to the employer, you cannot know if that has impacted their decision-making process. And sometimes, just checking the comments, and the other, I lost my train of thought. Some other thing that I also wanted to mention is that sometimes in our non-negotiables, there are things like, I really need accommodation for my disability, or my sexual orientation is really important to me, so I would like to share my pronouns. And if an employer is going to discriminate based on that, then I don't want to work for them. That's okay. But I just want you to make sure that you are making conscious decisions, that if you're sharing about some things about those information is because it is important to you personally, and you will be okay if you don't get the job based on kind of that information. But if you feel like as part of the process, your rights have been violated, you can always look for the organization enforcing labor or human rights in your region and check their website. In BC Human Rights Tribunal is a good place to start if you sense any discriminatory behavior from the employer. The process is usually long, but if you have faced discrimination and you're set on understanding what are your rights, what are some of the things you can do next, I encourage you to look at their website. They have a lot of good information. There are also free services that provide legal advice. So there is Law Students Legal Advice Program, which UBC Law students provide free legal advice through. And there's also CLASS, BC Human Rights Clinic, that provides information, workshops, and also one-on-one appointments with a human rights lawyer based on human rights concerns. So if you've also faced discrimination, you can always kind of connect with them. Is it legal for employers to ask for SIN? They usually ask for the SIN number at the hiring stage, so they would be able to kind of go through with their HR processes and kind of for tax reasons. So I would say it's not common to ask for SIN number in the beginning of the process, but once they have extended you an offer, they usually ask for that information to ensure that first you can work and also for tax reasons. But I would say don't share it widely, especially in the beginning of the interview, if you are applying for companies that are also not well known, right? Like if you're applying for like a really small company, you don't know their reputation, be a bit more careful with that person, like with those type of personal information. Okay. And another thing that I want to kind of highlight is negotiation, because I think the culture of whether or not to negotiate looks differently in different labor markets. And almost always the answer to should I negotiate is yes. I have never heard of a story where an offer has been rescinded because someone have negotiated. But what are some of the best practices? You always want to get into the process of interviews knowing your own worth. So you want to research your market value, and you can use websites like Glassdoor and PayScale that has some information. And you can also ask around in your network about the pay scale that is common in that industry. BC also has recently has recently a regulation that all employers need to publish the salary on the job application in the job posting. So it will be easier to see some of the ranges basically here in BC right now. And then I think it also is a good leverage to look at a specific job title that you're interested in, and then look through different job postings to see different ranges, different numbers that have been posted on them, to just get a sense of a range or like how different they are between different companies. And you want to ask for it when you have done that research. But when you actually ask, you always want to delay the salary negotiation to the offer stage. So you want to kind of get to a point where they are extending an offer, because at that point you have more leverage. And one of the ways to do that is always first ask for their range, not give them your range. So always ask, I'm just curious, what is your range for, or what is your budget for this? And if they're really set on asking, okay, you actually need to give us a range, we want to know if you're aligned, you can give the range that you have researched. So you can say, based on my research and what I've found in the market, I would be looking for something between 75 and 85K. However, I would like to know more about the role before I make a final kind of recommendation. And if the salary negotiation fails, you can always negotiate for other terms. So if there was this data certificate that you've always wanted to get, you can ask that as part of your package, or you can ask for more vacation or anything that you feel would make your experience better. Check that job and see if you can actually negotiate other terms rather than just like the dollar. And at the end, decide. Go back to your list of negotiables and non-negotiables. See where does this job stand, and does this really satisfy your current job search goals? And kind of thinking about if, for instance, an employer is making you an offer that is 35K and the market rate for it is 60K, what type of employer are they? Like, what is the company culture? And would you be okay working for that company? Have you heard other things through the interview process that is encouraging you to apply for it or not? So hopefully this framework gives you a little bit of understanding of how to negotiate, but please always negotiate. Like, don't be scared of negotiation. Nothing bad happens. Worst case scenario, they say, no, this is our range, and that's it. Yeah, so I will ask others to kind of keep themselves muted, because I've noticed that sometimes they go muted and unmuted. So let me actually do that for everyone before I continue. Okay. There is a question in the chat, but are there any career advisors with specific knowledge related to the immigration process? So the way that the UBC structure works is that all the career advisors, including me at the Career Center, we will be able to only help through the job search process. We are not certified immigration advisors. So for immigration related issues, you always need to consult with International Student Advising. Their office is in UBC Life Building. So we wouldn't, because none of us are certified, we're not allowed to provide any immigration related advice. Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, please take care of yourself through this process. It's going to be a marathon. It's not a walk down the street. Finding a job usually takes a long time. So make sure that you're taking breaks, not at a point where you're totally burnt down, you cannot do anything. Take breaks, when you're actually healthy enough to take them. And that can look like, now that the weather is better, going for a walk, meeting with a friend, or do a hobby that you like in the process. It's going to give you the energy to do a better job in your job search process. And I hope that you also know that if you feel like through this process, there are parts of it that is failing, you're sending out applications, they're not coming back with any answers, and it might feel like a failure. I would encourage you to think they're actually building blocks for the success that is going to come next. So if you're not hearing back, maybe talking to a career advisor and see what is not working. What can you do better? What can you learn from this process? If you are landing interviews, but you're not landing the final offer, maybe reflecting on, okay, what have I learned from the interviews that I haven't done too well in? And how can I do better in the next ones? And I hope that you also give yourself some grace. You are figuring out a new system from scratch. It's going to take time. And even if it feels like it's urgent, that feeling of urgency is not going to make it faster. So there will be some learning in this process. There will be some so-called failures, but there will be part of the process. And the fact that I understand there are some constraints that are really anxiety inducing, but they don't necessarily make this process faster. So if you beat yourself up in this process, the chances are it's going to take a longer time than if you kind of show yourself a little bit of kindness, that I'm learning a new system, I'm new here, it's going to take me some time. And a question in the chat: when you get an interview, do employers inform you if you didn't make it, or if they don't call you, you're just to assume you didn't make it, and would it be fine to send a follow-up? Yes. So once you get to an interview stage, usually because they interview a short list of candidates, they'll let the person know that they didn't make it to the next stage. That's the best practice. Having said that, not all companies have best practices. So I think it's always fair for you to follow up. And I would always myself ask one question at the part where I am allowed to ask questions, and that is, can you tell me about your timeline and when would I hear back from you about the next stages? And that will also give you a bit of an understanding of when to follow up. So maybe they will say, we're looking to conclude the interviews by end of this week and notify candidates by next week. If I haven't heard from them by Friday, I will send a follow-up email. So just get a sense of their timeline and then follow up accordingly. It's always okay to follow up. And on self-care, I think it's always empowering to think about what are some of the things that you have control over. You can't control over how fast the process is moving from the employer side, or what are some of the jobs that are actually posted, but you can track what are some of the things that you have control over. And that gives you a feeling of being in control, rather than I'm in this process that I don't know what is happening and my life depends on other people's decisions. So one of the ways you can track the things that you have control over is this sheet. You can create different versions of it. So you can, for instance, have one column that says, what do I need? I need a job that is a 45-minute commute time from campus. And then maybe the idea that you have is, maybe I will find employers that are along the Sky train line, or along the bus 99. And then look at Google and see what are some of the companies that are in that distance. And then think about your next steps. Maybe you will go over those employers and see which ones will be a better match. Or maybe what you really need is, I really want to work in a big tech company. That's what has been always a dream. That's what you want to do. Maybe the idea can be connect with some of the UBC alumni who actually work in a big tech company. How do I do that? Maybe I can use LinkedIn to do that. And then what are some of my next steps? Maybe I have scheduled some calls with people so I can think of some of the questions that I'm asking. If you're a tracker and someone who likes checklists, you can use this as an example, but you can always change the columns to things that make sense to you. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is I hope you get the most out of your UBC, your time at UBC, because I know when I was a grad student at UBC, I didn't necessarily know what was happening at UBC to be able to actually get the most out of my time at UBC. So I wanted to highlight some of the potential kind of experiences and opportunities that is on campus. UBC Career Center runs a program called WorkLearn. It's a 20-hour job opportunity on campus during the summer and 10 hours per week during the term 1 and term 2 winter terms. And right now, the application cycle for the summer term is open. There are hundreds of jobs that just opened on Monday, and the deadline for it is March 24th. If you need help with applying to some of those positions in terms of your documents, making sure you're sending in good applications, you can always book an appointment with an advisor at the center. Or every day from 11 to 1, we have drop-in advising appointments. You can just come by the center and an advisor will come see you. And if you are interested in research, there's also one research opportunity that is for international students. So if you have not heard of it, there is a WorkLearn International Undergraduate Research Award that is open only for international students. So you can also look into that as well. And all of the services at the Career Center is open both to graduate and undergraduate students. So as a graduate, we see a lot of graduate students as well. And then for the WorkLearn and graduating, you can work in WorkLearn program 1 term after your graduation. So if you're graduating in May or June, you can still apply to summer work terms, but you can only work that summer work term. So if a job says we want someone to continue into the year, and there are no exceptions, you cannot continue past that summer work term, but you can still apply for the summer term jobs. We also do different events to make sure that you can connect with employers and alumni. So you can always check our events page at UBC Career Center. After I finish talking, I'm going to send the registration link again. If you haven't filled out the attendance, please do so, because I can send you the slides and you can look at these resources by yourself. And as Career Center every year buys LinkedIn Learning subscriptions for all UBC students. So if you're looking for getting a specific certificate or learning about a specific software or a specific tool that you think is important for some of the jobs that you are applying to, you can always use that LinkedIn Learning. It's paid for. It has so many courses on it, so it would be actually a good opportunity. I'm gonna pause there and stop the recording so I can answer more questions. And I'm gonna also quickly put the link in the chat for attendance and also our survey. We wanna know how we did. We also have a 25 gift card draw for people who answer the survey. So if you're interested, it will be great. And let me stop the recording, and then I continue answering questions that come through the chat, or you are welcome to come on mic if you want to explain in more detail.